let me ask you a very important question. Have you ever eaten berries thinking, this is healthy, this will help my hair? But instead, your hair kept thinning, shedding, or falling out. Here's the shocking truth most people don't realize. It's not always the berries, it's the combinations. Today, I'm going to reveal 4 berry combinations that look healthy on the surface, but silently trigger hair falling and thinning by disrupting insulin, minerals, digestion, and hormones. If you're serious about protecting your hair, listen carefully. When people combine berries with yogurt, especially low fat or flavored yogurt, they often believe they're making a smart, hair-friendly choice. On the surface, it looks clean and nutritious. But when you understand what's happening biochemically, you start to see why this combination can quietly work against hair strength and density over time. Hair follicles are extremely sensitive to hormonal shifts, mineral availability, and protein utilization, and this pairing interferes with all 3. Low-fat yogurt is one of the most insulin-stimulating foods people regularly consume, even more than many sugary foods. When fat is removed, the proteins in yogurt, particularly whey, cause a rapid insulin spike. Now, insulin isn't just a blood sugar hormone, it's a growth signaling hormone. Chronically elevated insulin pushes the body toward inflammation and shifts nutrients away from long-term repair processes like hair regeneration. Many people wonder why their hair keeps thinning even though they're eating healthy, and insulin dysregulation is often a hidden piece of that puzzle. Now add berries into the mix. Berries contain natural fruit acids and fructose. On their own, in moderation, they're usually fine. But when combined with insulin-spiking dairy, you create a metabolic environment that prioritizes blood sugar control over nutrient delivery. One of the first things that suffers is mineral absorption, particularly zinc. Zinc is not optional for hair. It's required for keratin production, follicle repair, and proper oil gland function around the scalp. Even a mild, long-term zinc deficiency can show up as shedding, weak strands, or slow regrowth. There's also a digestive component most people overlook. Yogurt proteins require strong stomach acid for proper breakdown. Berries, being acidic but in a different way, can interfere with optimal protein digestion when eaten together, especially in people with already low stomach acid. Poor protein breakdown means fewer amino acids reach the hair follicle. Hair is essentially a protein structure, and when protein digestion is compromised, hair becomes thin, brittle, and prone to falling. Another issue is the illusion of low fat equals healthy. Fat is essential for hormone balance, including hormones that regulate hair growth cycles. When people consistently choose low fat yogurt, they're removing the very fats needed to stabilize blood sugar and reduce insulin spikes. This creates a repeated hormonal stress signal, and hair follicles interpret stress as a cue to shift into a shedding phase. That's why hair loss often lags behind dietary habits by weeks or months. It's a delayed response. Ask yourself this: if your breakfast looks healthy, but your hair keeps telling a different story, could the combination be the problem rather than the food itself? Hair loss rarely comes from one dramatic mistake. It's usually small daily choices that slowly drain the body's reserves. Berry and low fat yogurt is one of those quiet combinations that feels right, tastes good, and yet steadily undermines the nutritional foundation your hair depends on. When berries are paired with oats or granola, the combination is almost universally marketed as a perfect, healthy breakfast. Yet from a metabolic and nutritional standpoint, it creates several hidden problems that directly affect hair thickness and follicle strength over time. Hair is one of the first tissues to suffer when the body experiences repeated blood sugar instability and mineral depletion, and this pairing quietly drives both processes. Oats and most commercial granolas are dense in carbohydrates and contain significant amounts of phytic acid. Phytic acid is a mineral binding compound that locks onto iron, zinc, magnesium, and calcium in the digestive tract, preventing them from being absorbed. These minerals are not optional for hair health. Iron supports oxygen delivery to the follicle. Zinc is essential for keratin formation and follicle repair, and magnesium helps regulate stress hormones that control the hair growth cycle. When these minerals are consistently blocked, the body has no choice but to prioritize survival over cosmetic tissues like hair. Adding berries to oats or granola increases the glycemic load of the meal. Even though berries are often labeled as low sugar, they still contribute fructose and glucose, especially when eaten with a starch-based food. This combination triggers a stronger insulin response than most people realize. Insulin spikes don't just manage blood sugar, they shift the body into storage mode, increasing inflammation and reducing nutrient delivery to peripheral tissues, including the scalp. Over time, repeated insulin surges send a signal that the environment is stressful and unstable, and hair follicles respond by shortening their growth phase. There's also the issue of chronic energy highs followed by crashes. Many people notice they feel energized after eating berries with oats, only to experience fatigue or cravings a few hours later. That roller coaster effect is a clear sign of blood sugar instability. Hair follicles depend on a steady, predictable nutrient supply. When blood sugar rises and falls repeatedly, cortisol increases to compensate. Elevated cortisol is a known disruptor of hair growth, pushing follicles prematurely into the shedding phase. This is one reason thinning often appears around the crown or hairline in people who eat high-carb breakfasts daily. Another overlooked factor is the way this combination crowds out protein and healthy fats. A bowl of oats with berries and granola is heavily skewed toward carbohydrates, leaving very little room for the building blocks hair actually needs. Hair is made of protein, and its growth is regulated by fat-soluble hormones. When meals are dominated by starch and sugar, the body becomes efficient at burning glucose, but inefficient at repairing tissue. Over time, hair strands become finer, growth slows, and shedding becomes more noticeable. Consider how often this meal is repeated. Once in a while, the body can compensate, but daily exposure creates a cumulative effect. Nutrient deficiencies develop quietly, insulin resistance builds slowly, and hair loss shows up months later, seemingly without a clear cause. Many people are shocked when they change this one healthy habit and suddenly notice less shedding and stronger regrowth. The body responds quickly when insulin stabilizes and minerals become available again, and the hair is often the first place where that recovery becomes visible. Berry smoothies that include added honey, dates, agave, or other natural sweeteners are often promoted as nutrient-dense and energizing, yet this combination places a significant and often unrecognized burden on the body systems that directly regulate hair growth. What seems like a harmless upgrade for taste can quietly shift the body into a state where hair follicles no longer receive the signals or nutrients required to remain in a growth phase. Berries already contain fructose, albeit in modest amounts. When honey or dates are added, the fructose load increases rapidly. Unlike glucose, fructose is processed almost entirely by the liver. The liver has a limited capacity to handle fructose efficiently, and when that threshold is exceeded, it begins converting it into fat and inflammatory byproducts. This process interferes with the liver's ability to perform one of its most important roles, hormone regulation. Hair growth is tightly controlled by hormones, including thyroid hormones, cortisol, and sex hormones. When the liver is overwhelmed, hormonal balance is one of the first systems to suffer. Many people are surprised to learn that thinning hair is often linked to a sluggish or stressed liver rather than a scalp issue. Excess fructose contributes to insulin resistance even when it comes from natural sources. As insulin resistance develops, the body compensates by producing more insulin. Elevated insulin disrupts the delicate balance between testosterone and estrogen and increases the conversion of testosterone into DHT, a hormone strongly associated with hair thinning, especially at the crown and temples. This process happens quietly and gradually, which is why people rarely connect their daily smoothie habits to hair changes months later. There is also a mineral cost to this combination. High fructose intake increases the excretion of key minerals such as magnesium and zinc through the urine. Zinc deficiency alone is enough to impair keratin production and slow follicle repair. Magnesium plays a critical role in calming the nervous system and regulating stress hormones. When these minerals are depleted, the body shifts into a low-grade stress response. Hair follicles are extremely sensitive to stress signals, and even mild. Chronic stress can push them out of the growth phase and into shedding. Another overlooked issue is the speed at which these smoothies are absorbed. Blended fruits require very little digestion. The sugars enter the bloodstream rapidly, creating a sharp rise in blood sugar followed by a compensatory insulin surge. This rapid fluctuation sends a message of instability to the body. Hair thrives in a stable internal environment. Repeated blood sugar swings tell the body that energy availability is unpredictable, and under those conditions, hair growth is considered non-essential. Many people drink these smoothies daily, sometimes even twice a day, believing they are supporting health. Over time, the cumulative effect becomes visible in subtle ways: slower hair growth, finer strands, increased shedding during brushing or washing. The frustrating part is that everything still looks healthy on paper. Fruit, honey, dates, nothing appears extreme. Yet the body responds not just to ingredients, but to combinations and metabolic load. When fructose intake is reduced and smoothies are simplified, the liver often recovers quickly. Hormonal signals stabilize, mineral losses slow down, and the internal environment becomes more supportive of tissue repair. Hair follicles respond when the metabolic stress is removed. What once seemed like a harmless habit can turn out to be the quiet trigger, and recognizing that connection is often the turning point in reversing ongoing hair thinning. When berries are combined with citrus fruits such as oranges, pineapples, grapefruits, or lemon juice, the mixture is often perceived as refreshing, cleansing, and supportive of overall health. Yet this particular pairing creates an internal environment that can quietly interfere with nutrient absorption, digestive efficiency, and oxygen delivery to the hair follicle. Over time, these subtle disruptions can translate into increased shedding, thinning strands, and slower regrowth, even in individuals who otherwise eat well. Both berries and citrus fruits are acidic in nature, but they affect the digestive system in different ways. When consumed together, the total acid load of the meal can become excessive, especially for people with already compromised digestion. Adequate stomach acid is required to properly break down proteins and liberate minerals from food. When acidity becomes unbalanced, protein digestion weakens instead of improving. Poorly digested protein means fewer amino acids reach the bloodstream, and hair follicles, which rely heavily on a steady amino acid supply, begin to suffer. Hair may continue to grow, but it grows weaker, thinner, and more prone to breakage. Iron absorption is another critical issue with this combination. Hair follicles require iron to transport oxygen to rapidly dividing cells within the growth phase. While vitamin C from citrus is often promoted as enhancing iron absorption, this benefit is context dependent. In meals dominated by fruit acids without sufficient protein or buffering minerals, iron can become irritated in the gut lining rather than efficiently absorbed. For individuals with borderline iron levels, this repeated interference can quietly push them into deficiency. Hair shedding is often one of the earliest visible signs, long before fatigue or anemia is diagnosed. There is also a strong digestive signaling effect to consider. Citrus fruits stimulate rapid gastric emptying, while berries contain compounds that slow digestion. When these opposing signals occur simultaneously, digestion becomes inefficient and unpredictable. Food may pass through the stomach before it has been properly processed, leading to malabsorption. Nutrients can be present in the diet, yet unavailable to the tissues that need them. Hair follicles, being low on the body's priority list, are among the first to be deprived when absorption efficiency declines. Blood sugar regulation is another layer that is often overlooked. Citrus fruits, particularly pineapple and orange juice, can raise blood sugar more quickly than expected. When combined with berries, especially in blended or juiced form, the sugars are absorbed rapidly. This creates a swift rise in glucose followed by an insulin response. Repeated blood sugar fluctuations signal metabolic stress. Hair follicles are highly responsive to insulin and cortisol levels, and when these hormones fluctuate frequently, follicles are more likely to exit the growth phase prematurely. There is also an inflammatory aspect to this combination. Citrus fruits contain bioactive compounds that can be irritating to sensitive digestive linings. When paired with berries, which also contain potent plant chemicals, the immune system in the gut can become overstimulated. Low-grade gut inflammation reduces the efficiency of nutrient transport and increases intestinal permeability. Once inflammation becomes chronic, the body diverts nutrients toward immune defense rather than tissue repair. Hair growth slows as a result, not because of a lack of food, but because of constant internal prioritization away from regeneration. Another important consideration is copper and zinc balance. Citrus, heavy diets can alter mineral ratios, particularly when consumed frequently with berries. Zinc is essential for hair, follicle repair, and oil gland regulation, while copper, in excess, can interfere with zinc absorption. An imbalance between these two minerals is commonly associated with hair thinning, and texture changes. This imbalance does not happen overnight, which is why the connection is rarely made. The hair gradually becomes finer, sheds more easily, and loses its resilience. Hydration signals are also affected by this pairing. Citrus fruits can act as mild diuretics in some individuals, increasing fluid loss. When this happens alongside high fruit acid intake, the scalp can become subtly dehydrated. A dehydrated scalp produces weaker hair shafts and may increase oil gland activity as a compensatory response. This creates an environment where hair is more likely to fall rather than anchor firmly in the follicle. Many people consume berry and citrus combinations daily in the form of juices, detox drinks, or fruit bowls, believing consistency amplifies benefits. In reality, repetition amplifies metabolic stress when the combination is mismatched. The body is highly adaptive, but adaptation under constant stress leads to compromise. Hair changes often appear slowly, months after the dietary pattern is established, making the cause difficult to trace. What makes this combination particularly deceptive is how clean and natural it appears. There is no processed food, no artificial ingredient, nothing obviously harmful, yet physiology responds to biochemical interactions, not marketing labels. When digestion, mineral absorption, blood sugar regulation, and oxygen delivery are even slightly impaired day after day, hair follicles receive the message that conditions are not ideal for growth. Shedding becomes more frequent, regrowth slows, and the overall density gradually declines, often without any dramatic warning signs. The most important thing to understand about hair thinning and shedding is that it is rarely caused by a single food or a single deficiency. Hair loss is almost always the end result of a long chain of metabolic signals that have been quietly building beneath the surface. When the body senses instability, whether from blood sugar swings, mineral depletion, digestive stress, or hormonal disruption, it begins to reallocate resources. Hair follicles, which demand a constant supply of nutrients and energy, are among the first to be downgraded when the body shifts into protection mode. The body is designed for survival, not aesthetics. When insulin rises too often, when cortisol stays elevated, or when digestion becomes inefficient, the body receives a clear message that conditions are unpredictable. In that state, it prioritizes vital organs like the brain and heart while slowing down processes considered non-essential for survival. Hair growth falls into that category. This is why people can eat what appears to be a clean, natural diet and still experience progressive hair thinning. The issue is not always what is being eaten, but how the body is interpreting and processing those inputs. One of the most overlooked drivers of hair loss is repeated insulin signaling. Even moderate insulin spikes, when they happen day after day, alter the hormonal environment. Insulin influences other hormones, including thyroid hormones and sex hormones, both of which directly regulate the hair growth cycle. When insulin remains elevated, the conversion of active thyroid hormone slows, metabolism becomes less efficient, and hair follicles lose the energetic signal required to stay in the growth phase. Many people notice their hair becoming finer before it starts shedding, which is often the earliest sign of this metabolic slowdown. Mineral depletion plays an equally critical role. Zinc, iron, magnesium, and selenium are all essential for hair structure, oxygen delivery, and follicle repair. When digestion is compromised or when certain food combinations block absorption, the body may maintain normal blood levels by pulling minerals from storage tissues. Hair follicles do not have storage capacity. Once mineral availability drops, hair growth weakens almost immediately. Shedding increases not because the scalp is unhealthy, but because the follicle cannot maintain structural integrity. There is also a neurological component that rarely gets discussed. Blood sugar instability stimulates the stress response, increasing cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are designed for short-term emergencies, not daily stimulation. When they remain elevated, they alter circulation patterns, reducing blood flow to the scalp. Hair follicles require a rich supply of oxygen and nutrients delivered through healthy circulation. Reduced blood flow sends a clear signal that growth conditions are poor. Over time, follicles shorten their growth cycle, producing thinner hairs that fall out more easily. Hormonal balance is another critical piece. Hair growth is regulated by a precise balance between growth promoting and growth inhibiting hormones. When the liver becomes overburdened from constant metabolic stress, its ability to regulate hormones declines. This can increase the conversion of certain hormones into forms that promote follicle miniaturization. The change is subtle at first. Hair may lose volume, texture may change, and styling becomes more difficult. These are early warnings that the internal environment is shifting. What often surprises people is how quickly the body can respond once the stressors are removed. Hair follicles are resilient. When insulin stabilizes, when minerals are restored, and when digestion improves, follicles can re-enter the growth phase. New hair growth may not be immediate, but reduced shedding is often the first sign that the internal signals are changing. This is why focusing solely on topical treatments rarely produces lasting results. The message controlling hair growth comes from inside the body, not from the surface of the scalp. Consistency matters more than intensity. Occasional dietary mistakes are not the issue. The problem arises when metabolically stressful combinations are repeated daily under the assumption that they are beneficial. Over weeks and months, the cumulative effect becomes visible. Hair loss then appears sudden, even though the process has been unfolding quietly for a long time. Recognizing this pattern shifts the focus from chasing symptoms to correcting signals. The most powerful question to ask is whether daily habits are creating stability or stress. hair thrives in a stable internal environment where blood sugar is steady, digestion is efficient, minerals are available, and hormones are balanced. When those conditions are met, hair growth becomes a natural outcome rather than a struggle. The body does not resist growing hair, it simply responds to the signals it receives. Change the signals, and the response changes with them. Hair loss becomes far less confusing when you stop viewing it as a cosmetic problem and start seeing it as feedback from the body. Hair follicles are constantly responding to internal signals related to blood sugar stability, nutrient availability, digestion, circulation, and hormonal balance. When those signals are supportive, hair grows with strength and consistency. When they are disruptive, shedding becomes the body's quiet way of conserving resources. This is why external solutions so often disappoint. They address the surface while the message is coming from much deeper inside. What many people miss is that the body does not react dramatically to a single meal or an occasional choice. It responds to patterns, small daily combinations that elevate insulin, reduce mineral absorption, or stress digestion can gradually shift the internal environment away from growth and repair. Hair, being metabolically expensive tissue, reflects these shifts earlier than many other systems. Changes in texture, volume, and density are often early indicators long before more obvious symptoms appear. When internal stability is restored, the response can be surprisingly fast. Reduced shedding is often the first sign, followed by improved hair texture and stronger regrowth over time. This does not require extreme measures or restriction, but rather awareness and alignment with how the body processes food and manages stress. The goal is not perfection, but consistency in creating conditions that favor repair instead of protection. Hair follicles are not weak or defective, they are adaptive. They listen closely to hormonal signals, nutrient flow, and energy availability. When those signals improve, follicles respond accordingly. This shift in perspective removes frustration and replaces it with clarity. Hair growth becomes less about chasing products and more about creating an internal environment where growth is the natural and expected outcome.